Good morning, everybody. Lots of fun stuff coming your way today on GoJo and Golic. Just the way to ease into your week. What happened on Saturday in college football? We had 5 AP top teams lose on the same day. That was crazy. Plus, Lamar Jackson, oh my God, getting the win in OT. We will talk about that. Plus, the rookies are rolling. Jaden Daniels setting records. Caleb Williams finding his groove. I don't know. We'll talk about all of that coming up on GoJo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here. We're presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal. We got a great show coming up, as always. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave it a 5-star rating and check us out live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Marshall Newhouse will join us in hour number 2 as usual to help us react to a very full NFL weekend. We also got to go goalpost hunting because, to Jesse's point, it was that kind of weekend in college football. Tearing down goalposts and watching them go through Nashville was an elite part of my Saturday night, and something that lets you know that what we thought was a throwaway slate in college football this weekend actually turned into maybe the most impactful of the young season so far. But speaking of impact, the impact on my dad this morning is going to be felt because Dad was at the site of Sunday Night Football last night where, not to undersell the NFL, we had some wild stuff go on yesterday, including a Sunday Night Football game that unfortunately got delayed, that the Dallas Cowboys ultimately win in dramatic fashion, and I think it's a game that you can sort of Rorschach test yourself on with the Dallas Cowboys to believe what you want to. But, Dad, what did you do during the rain delay right now as you are here, I'm guessing, on very little sleep this morning?
Yeah, it was. The game started about an hour and a half late, supposed to kick at 8:20, kicked at 9:50. So it was, it was a little late, and it was like the old radio days of fill time, because this was Westwood One National Radio for the game. So back to the studio, filled some time. Ryan Radke and I filled some time. So it was a little bit back and forth, just wondering, I mean, because it was a torrential downpour with thunder, with lightning. And it's what I found out too is, you know how in college, if there's lightning, there's an automatic, half hour or 45-minute delay. There is no rule in the NFL about lightning and time that you have to wait. It was actually NBC's rule for their their employees working the cameras, that they won't put them out there if there's lightning. So we had found that out, during the time when you are sitting around finding out information when there's a delay. But that was an interesting thing that we had learned. And kudos.
That is pretty interesting because in college, it's a half hour after the most recent lightning strike within a certain distance of the stadium. So there is a codified rule for that. And you're telling me the NFL, this multi-billion-dollar industry, is built off vibes and, well, I shouldn't be surprised, listening to their television partner, which seems like how we've gotten here to begin with.
That was what we were led to believe when we were, you find out a lot of information in a delay. Everybody is looking for tidbits of information to talk about. And that's what we had heard. And Ryan and I were somewhat stunned at that because it was thundering and lightning, definitely before a half hour before this game continued. But they played it the right way. They decided to delay the start because it just was lightly raining right around the time the game was going to start. But, everybody who was playing weathermen was saying, well, the bad stuff is going to roll through. So instead of starting the game, getting everybody soaked and having to delay the game, they just delayed the start of the game. And it worked out actually perfectly, save for the fact I got back to the hotel at 2:45. It worked out great for the game itself because you didn't have to start play, get your uniform soaked, go in the locker room, wait, stop play, and then prepare again. And the field drained beautifully because there wasn't the slipping and sliding you thought, because again, it was torrential downpour, and the game just was slow. Obviously, in the first half, you and I were texting one another, and I don't know, I don't think that had to do with the weather because there wasn't a lot of slipping and sliding. Everybody didn't seem to be wet and having a tough time standing or moving or braking or changing direction. So it didn't really have an effect. So kudos to the drainage of the field, but the game sure got going in the second half. No doubt about it. Listen, Dallas outplayed Pittsburgh in this game, but in the first half, you have a Dak interception, a Dak fumble, a blocked field goal. So I'm sure Mike McCarthy at halftime is telling the guys, listen, we're there. We're down there. We're in the red zone or close to the red zone. We just have to get the payoff, which eventually they did a couple of times to get the win, one right at the end of the game. But they were there. And Mike, the most important stat to me wasn't the fact that Dak threw for 352, because Dak had a couple interceptions. It was not the greatest performance by Dak. But their running attack, they're dead last. They're possibly going to set a franchise record. They're averaging 75 yards a game rushing, and the record that they've rushed for in a year is 79. So right now, or before the game, they were below a franchise record of what they rushed for in a game. And in the first half of this game, they ran the ball 10 times for 23 yards. They were living up to the fact that they couldn't run the ball. In the second half, they ran it 21 times for 86 yards. They ended up having the ball for 5 minutes more possession time than Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh was reversed. Pittsburgh in the first half ran it 18 times for 70 yards, and in the second half, they ran it just 8 times for 22 yards. It's like they reversed roles, and for Dallas, a team that couldn't stop the run, all of a sudden was stopping Pittsburgh's running, and for a Dallas team that couldn't run, all of a sudden was running the ball. And Mike, as an O-lineman, that just opens up the playbook when you all of a sudden have success running the ball.
Well, and I guess, Dad, that you bring me to exactly where I wanted to go, which is, should Dallas feel good coming off of this win? Because there's a lot of parts of this that didn't feel good. You mentioned the 2 Dak interceptions were pretty mind-blowing, and you saw a very dejected Dak Prescott on the sideline, especially after the first one. Anytime you've got a blocked kick in a game, the fumble on the game down on the goal line, all of these different things that normally leave you feeling net negative. But for Dallas, zooming back out going into this game, you were coming into this defensively down 2 of, you could argue, your 2 best players, if not 2 of, certainly your best in Micah Parsons and then DeMarcus Lawrence. And to go and have the performance that they did by and large throughout this game, like, Dad, in the first half during that rock fight, the Dallas defense was doing their part. It was just the offense couldn't get out of their own way with the mistakes, and so the game stayed close enough long enough to eventually something was going to happen for this Pittsburgh offense. And so, I don't know, Dad, based on what you saw, should Dallas Cowboys, their team and their fans, feel emboldened by what they saw that, this season might actually have a chance when we get a little bit healthier on both sides of the balls? They also lose their starting rookie left tackle, Tyler Guyton, during the course of this game to what looked like a knee injury as well.
Yeah, I would be hesitant if I were the Cowboy fans in looking positively at it, though diehards are going to look positively at it, because then you'll just get disappointed, right? Because then they'll have that stinker. And again, this was no Picasso by any stretch of the imagination. The 2 touchdown drives were good. The touchdown drive that left 20 seconds on the clock at the end was a fantastic drive, capped off by one of the really good throws by Dak on a crossing route by Jalen Tolbert. So I can't say. I mean, they play the Lions. They have a bye, and then they're at San Francisco and at Atlanta. So those are some tough games. So get back to me after the next 3 games to see if Dallas belongs in the talk of the upper echelon or a team that can't run the ball and just makes mistakes when I mean, look at the end of the game. I mean, when right before they scored the winning touchdown, they're second down on the 1-yard line, and Dowdle tries to go over the top, and a Steeler defender Superman's over the line like Troy Polamalu and knocks the ball out, and luckily it bounced right back to Dak, or that would have been the ball game on another turnover. So I would hold judgment just yet. They still don't have now Tolbert had a good game for them because it's been CeeDee Lamb and it's been Jake Ferguson. Dowdle had a good rushing game. So can they build on that? Can they show consistency with other playmakers like Tolbert? Because Brandon Cooks was out with a knee infection in this game. And you mentioned the defense, DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons out, and the rookie Marshawn Nealon takes over for Micah, and he gets hurt in the game. So, I mean, they were going deep into the lineup. And you mentioned Tyler Guyton, but let me tell you what, Tyler Guyton is struggling. Nate Herbert, the other rush end outside of TJ Watt, was just having his way with Guyton. Had all kinds of pressures, had a half a sack, but had at least a handful of pressures. They kicked Tyler Smith, the left guard, out to left tackle, and it seemed he did a little bit better. And then Herbert actually went out with a hamstring injury because he and TJ were wreaking havoc in the backfield.
Yeah, it was not a great time. It hasn't been a great time for Tyler so far this season. So Nick Herbig, you mentioned 5 pressures in this game to go along with the half a sack. He was incredibly effective. TJ Watt on the other side, like as we talk about some of the Steelers portion of it, because I think you're right about the Cowboys, Dad. It's hard to feel good about anything with this team. Between the injuries that have ravaged you, that certainly have shown no signs of slowing down, you could take the Rico Dowdle stuff as a positive. Obviously, you find a way to win off the strength of some backups that you mentioned stepping up. It's admirable, but for where this Dallas Cowboys team is, it doesn't necessarily leave you a lot of hope for where they can go as a team. And that's the ultimate thing that I feel like I have to admit that I was wrong to you about, was this Dallas Cowboys team this year, certainly below. This looks like the remnants of the current form of this roster, the remnants of the team that's been accomplishing 12 wins a season so far, and whatever's left right now is just sort of sputtering towards the finish, and it'll flash brief moments where you see what it could be and what it looks like, but it just seems so far through a quarter now and change of the season that they lack anything resembling the ability to produce on the top end or the consistency that's going to be required to be a team that overcomes and gets past the hump that they're at now, and that's got to be the frustration for Cowboys fans, is what you're used to, this seems like it's going to even fall below that, and what you're used to has still been well below the standard that building believes they're entitled to of actually being a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, just inconsistencies, and thank you on correcting me on Nick Herbig. Nate Herbig was their center who got hurt in the preseason for the Steelers. Nick Herbig with the great pressures and then the hammy injury. Yeah, I can't figure it out with the Cowboys, and it seems like they can't get the consistency 2-2 going into the game, but they end up getting a nice win. And for Pittsburgh, you now they have a little easier next 3 games. I talked about Dallas. They're at the Raiders, and they play home to the Jets and home to the Giants, though the Giants did have a nice win yesterday. For Pittsburgh, I mean, I think there's a reason Mike Tomlin didn't just come out and name Justin Fields the starter, because he's, just waiting to see, A, when Russell Wilson can come back, and B, not having to put himself in a situation of saying Justin is the starter no matter what. And then Justin, the passing game struggled. I mean, and they relied on the rushing attack, and the rushing attack struggled, especially in the second half, and they couldn't get the passing game going, even though Justin Fields throws for over 300 yards in the loss to the Colts because they were down 17-zip. Pretty quickly in that game. They just couldn't get the passing game on track, and they don't pass the ball. And now, not a lot of teams do, actually downfield. It's a lot of quick passes. Justin Fields is the top quarterback in percentage of throwing passes outside the numbers. It's catch, it's release, quick pass outside the numbers, and let the receivers do the work.
Yeah, that's certainly what it's been for them. The Steelers, to me, again, I know we've talked about them being a division leader early on. They look like a team with a pretty decided ceiling at this point, where I just don't think there is enough talent consistently executing on offense, I should say, because defensively, we have to congratulate TJ Watt on yet another defensive milestone. He becomes the second fastest defender to 100 sacks in his 109th NFL game last night, Dad, second behind only your former teammate Reggie White, who did it in 96 games in his career. And it's kind of like at the beginning of the year. And listen, Minka Fitzpatrick is a great player on the back end of that defense. There are other guys. Cam Hayward's been playing great ball this year after some contract consternation this offseason. But TJ Watt has such an ability to take over a game all by himself. And you saw that at junctures last night where we focused on the rookie on the other side. It's not like Terrence Steele had any more fun with TJ Watt on the right side of this offensive line either.
No, and both the tackles, Steele and Guyton, ranked pretty low in opposing pressure rate. And they had given up pressures this year. And again, you had TJ Watt on one side, Nick Herberg on the other side, just meeting at the quarterback. TJ Watt is so fast off the ball. He turns the corner so quickly. And if it's a run, he changes direction incredibly well. The man burns up a lot of fuel during a game because he just absolutely takes off. And got kind of 4 games to be the second fastest to 100 sacks, because what was number 2 to 100 sacks was 113 games by I believe DeMarcus Ware. I believe it was DeMarcus Ware who got to 100 in 113 games, and this was only the 109th for TJ Watt. You only needed a half sack to get to 100, so you knew he was going to get it. But it also lets you think of just how amazing my former teammate Reggie White was. 96 games. 96 games it took to get to 100 sacks. Unbelievable.
Yeah, a freak show effort from the two of them. And so I guess, Dad, big picture coming off this game, unfortunately, it seems for two franchises that have big brand name followings, and this gets referenced a ton anytime you talk about them, unfortunately, right now, they're well below contender status, both of these teams. In my mind, the Steelers are tied for the division lead with the Baltimore Ravens, but I think we see after the Baltimore Ravens start, regardless of what happened yesterday in a game that was a wild back and forth, almost like old school Big 12 game of a college football outing where you've got two incredible quarterbacks in Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow that went toe for toe the entire time. This Ravens team is certainly flawed compared to last year. Like, last year is the much better version of this team from what we've seen so far, especially defensively. But I do think the Bengals are firmly in the driver's seat when it comes to the AFC North. And this Steelers team, while they are technically tied with them, I can't view on the same footing because, again, there are just tools they don't have in the bag when it comes to being able to go out and win games in a variety of ways or a variety of game scripts.
I put the Steelers third in the division behind both Cincinnati and Baltimore. They rely so heavily on their defense and the running attack. And the running attack now yesterday didn't have Jaylen Warren with a knee, Cordell Patterson with an ankle. It was just Najee Harris, and then you had the design runs by Justin Fields. But they don't have a great passing game. They lean on low-scoring, close wins. In their 3-0 start, their opponents none of their opponents had over 10 points. So they rely on the defense. So I think they're third in that division. And with Dallas, Mike, I just think they're too inconsistent. Sometimes they look really good, and other times they just look like a team that relies on Dak Prescott to CeeDee Lamb, though Jalen Tolbert got more involved, that relies on Dak Prescott and Jake Ferguson. Didn't have a running game, though they did show signs of it. But I wouldn't put my hat now on, the Cowboys have a running game. They did in this game against a really good running defense in the Pittsburgh Steelers. So feather in the cap to them, no doubt about it. But I don't know if I can just count on the Cowboys to be consistent, especially with Washington playing offensively the way they're playing in the NFC East.
Yeah, it's certainly a game that if you're a Cowboys fan, I think maybe where we ultimately land is it's a game that almost makes you more frustrated because you see these flashes, but you understand between injury and the way your owner decided to go about this offseason, you still might not have the faculties for this big man.
to GoJo and Golic, Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. It is time for the appropriately named Mic'd Up Monday. Sounds from around the NFL on Sunday. Now let's discuss another installment of Ravens-Bengals. All right, the rivalry did not disappoint. Here's Joe Burrow after the very tough loss.
We're not a championship level team right now. We're not. I like to think that, we'll come back and improve throughout the season to get to that point, but right now we are not, and we have to get better.
Is it frustrating that you're 5 weeks in, it's still not at that level that you all thought it might be going into the season?
Yes.
This Ken's job is losing, you guys. He needs to he needs to shave his head. He needs to sage the blonde hair off his head. I don't know what's going on, but it's not working.
I mean, he doesn't need to do anything. He needs to walk over into that defensive locker room and ask them when they're going to decide to hold up their end of the bargain. Because Joe Burrow, Dad, in this offense, I would disagree with him. That's a championship-level offense. It's what we've seen from the Cincinnati Bengals offensively there. Jamar Chase had 193 yards and 2 touchdowns on a day where Joe Burrow's 8 yards shy of 4 Bills. That offense went out there and went toe for toe with a Ravens team that's going to be, as you mentioned, every bit their counterpart in this division. I think it's for both of these teams. Baltimore defensively on the back end, a flawed unit, one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. And then the Bengals, pretty much every which way on defense, have struggled out of the gate this season in a way that's got them sitting there wondering what's going to happen. But offensively, it's the same thing that we expected with this group. T. Higgins showed up in a big way, as did Jamar Chase and certainly Joe Burrow. So I have very little concerns about his side of the ball.
Starting with game 2, the Cincinnati Bengals defense gave up 26 to the Chiefs, 38 to the Commanders, 24 to the Panthers, and 41 to the Ravens. So, yeah, and we said this in the beginning of the season. Once everybody was healthy, T. Higgins came back from injury, that if this offense was healthy, the offense was going to be just fine. It was, I always thought it was the defense that was going to struggle, and the defense is struggling mightily. And even Baltimore's defense, you talk about the back end. When I did Baltimore and the Bills last week, going into that game, Baltimore had given up one explosive run of over 10 yards, but 28 explosive passes of over 15 yards, and they were giving them up left and right in that game yesterday. Passes over 15 yards, whether it was a short pass, yards after the catch, or a longer pass down the field. The back end for Baltimore is absolutely struggling. But the offenses, listen, this is one of those you don't want to go in the film room as a defensive player. The only good side on Baltimore is that they won the game, and at least you could take, your whooping in the film room and know at least you walked out with a W. But the Baltimore defense giving up 38 points. It's not a great defensive film session, but 9 touchdowns, over 700 yards of passing. This was an offensive show that fans would love.
Your point about Baltimore on defense, Dad, they are, in terms of pass yards per game, the second worst pass defense in the NFL, and they're the best rush defense in the NFL. No one is giving up fewer yards per carry than the Baltimore Ravens on defense. And so you've got this dichotomy there where we're looking for what's been the changes since Zach Orr took over as the coordinator, Mike McDonald and a bunch of that other talent leaves town. And right now the back end seems to be the place where that suffered. Dad, this is also the dumbest finish to the best football game I've seen in quite a while, where we get to overtime with this incredible game. And you've got Lamar Jackson, the reigning MVP, who has ushered in a performance every bit the equal of Joe Burrow across the street, and instead almost loses it on a fumbled snap as he's clapping for the ball up against the play clock, trying to get it there, and it hits him right in the hands, just goes through it, drops it, and fumbles it like the Three Stooges, only to watch the Bengals then get the ball within field goal range already. McPherson is an incredibly clutch kicker in these situations, as the broadcast documented. And so, of course, they botch the hold and he hooks it. And then Derrick Henry rips off a run the next play that ends the game. Just an absolutely chaotic finish to a fantastic football game where, again, I look at it both and say, all right, both these offenses, as advertised, we had a Mark Andrews sighting yesterday for the Baltimore Ravens. Derrick Henry had to go on the shelf for most of the game. But, Dad, I think if you're the Baltimore Ravens looking at this performance, that's the most encouraging thing. You can win a lot of different ways on offense. Now, we've seen them lose it a bunch of ways early in this season, but to be a championship level team, we always talk about at the end of the year, you've got to have options when someone takes away your best pitch or when the game script goes wonky. It's why we said the Steelers are kind of off to the side in this conversation, because I don't think they can win a shootout like this. Baltimore can win putting the pill in 22's breadbasket 20, 30 times a game, and they can also win with Lamar Jackson putting on the hero cape like this.
Yeah, they can. Cincinnati can't run the ball like Baltimore can run the ball. And to Lamar's credit, he spread the ball around to Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman, 3 tight ends getting into the act, including Charlie Kohler, the 3rd tight end, having a touchdown catch and 3 receptions. And you're right. I mean, the athletic ability shown in this game by Lamar Jackson, you mentioned the fumble in overtime, but the touchdown when it was 38-28, 8:54 to go, and Lamar fumbles the snap, picks it up, just stiff arms Sam Hubbard, keeps him away, rolls right, and you think he's throwing it away, but finds Isaiah Likely in the end zone for a touchdown. It was one of the 3 times Cincinnati was up by 10 points and lost the lead each time. And ultimately you get it tied on a 56-yarder with about $1:30 left that Tucker hits to tie it up for Baltimore to send it into overtime. And then you're right. I mean, Evan McPherson, to his credit, didn't blame Ryan Rakow, the rookie undrafted punter. He said, whether it's the good snap or not, I got to put the ball through the uprights. And I can't believe how well he connected on the ball with the bad hold that happened. But they miss it. And then, as you mentioned, Derrick Henry rips off a 51-yarder. It's a chip shot for Tucker, and that's ball game.
Let me tell you what, too. Jordan Stout, the holder for the Baltimore Ravens, he went out there and snapped that thing down with the crispness after that. You want to talk about a man who was dialed into his job after watching his counterpart go out there and fumble the bag. He snapped that thing down, stuck it in place, and Justin Tucker did the rest. So the Ravens get a win there. And again, for the Bengals, it's the problem that I think is going to persist all year. It's the holdover from last year and the question we said they had to answer, which was, hey, it was Lou Anarumo and that defense going to become a thing again, and so far they have been the Achilles heel for this team as they're going to try and make moves in a very crowded AFC North right now. Speaking of inexplicable decisions, though, Jesse, let's get to another bit of sound from the NFL this weekend, something that I know had Dad fired up at the end of the Bills loss.
Yeah, so we had a couple 3-1 teams doing battle with a sprinkle of reunion in the mix. Stephon Diggs and the Texans taking on his old team in the Bills. And like you said, a bit of a moment here. Sean McDermott, here he is on the decision that the Bills went with, going for 3 straight passes late in the game. Definitely a head scratcher.
Sean, were you on board with the 3 play call, the 3 passes in that situation?
I'm not going to get into that. I don't think that's relevant right now, Sal. Overall, again, that's all me. And so we just got to do a better job. I got to do a better job in that situation.
Love that. It's not relevant. Like, I think it's kind of relevant.
I would argue it's the most relevant, probably, of anything in that game, Dad, as I know you were texting me in real time the frustration and the completely flummoxed nature of this decision.
So 32 seconds left. The Bills have the ball on their own 3-yard line. Tie ball game. Now, Houston does have all 3 of their timeouts. And the thought is you're backed up to the 3-yard line. Why are you going to, try and get out of that situation? And I guess while I can understand a small amount of passing the ball to try and get first downs, I don't understand the first ball, a deep ball. I mean, and they were all longer throws down the field, because you're also taking the chance that there's a holding penalty in the end zone.
Right.
Because all 3 times Josh Allen is throwing the ball from the end zone, and if there's a holding penalty on the O-line, that's a safety, and that's going to be ball game. So I was very surprised they didn't run the ball, try and get a little bit out away from the goal line and make Houston burn their timeouts, because Houston can't run the play they run to get in field goal range without having the ability to have a timeout. They would have needed to be out of bounds, have sideline plays, but they had their timeouts because of 3 incomplete passes by Buffalo. So I definitely disagree with those play calls.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things because remember, before the Bills got the ball back on that drive, there was the intentional grounding by C.J. Stroud, and they declined the 10-second runoff from that because I'm sure in their mind they're thinking if we get this ball in any sort of, if they punt it out the back of the end zone and we get the ball in decent field position, we've got a really good quarterback who, listen, Josh Allen was 9 for 30 or whatever on the day, wasn't his fastball, but you trust over the larger body of work. Hey, we've got one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Let's give him an opportunity to go win the game. Once that ball gets down to the 3, any coach will tell you the percentages of scoring or doing anything valuable from there go through the floor. And so I'm with you. I'm not down on them for attempting a pass, but to go 3 straight there, not make them use any timeouts, or give your team that at this point in this game especially a much better rushing team than they were a passing team in this one. Like, say what you want about the Bills' passing attack. When they handed the ball off to James Cook, they were finding success at different points in this game, and so it was just a baffling sequence of plays that, you're right, before they made the kick, the Texans gained 5 yards that took that from being a 60-plus yard kick to a still, even in modern NFL kicker standards, 59-yarder is a pretty solid swing of the leg, and you can do that when you can bang a timeout easy and got some to spare still. So I'm with you. Inexplicable decision-making there at the end for a Bills team that, listen, definitely didn't look themselves, but Houston's also a team we imagine is going to be in the mix. Nico Collins going out with that injury in the midst of that game. We talked about Stephon Diggs, who led them in receptions and yards in this game, in large part because Nico Collins, after some early impact, unfortunately went off with injury. So we'll wait to see what the future looks like there for that Texans team that was able to get after Josh Allen pretty good defensively. Jesse, let's get to the last bit of sound here from the game that we sent across the pond, our London export of Vikings and Jets.
Yeah, so take a listen to what came out of the early game. And if you're a Jets fan, just look away or cover your earmuffs, please.
Taking accountability from the top to the bottom, that's the main thing, bro. That's all I got to say for real.
All right, let's talk about the fumble recovery. What happened there?
Just lost my battle, man. I gotta get that one to the end zone, bro. When my number get called, bro, that's it.
What's the mentality of this team right now?
Like I said, people gotta start taking accountability, bro. People get tired of hitting the same thing every week.
For you, what do you need to work on?
I'm tired of saying the same thing every week. For me, I need to start working on being a leader more. That's the main thing.
That was an ugly game, guys. Hard to watch.
Dad, this is another one, though, where the person talking and taking accountability isn't really the side of the ball I have the issue with, because watching that game in London, the Vikings and the Jets defenses, that was the show in this game. We finally got the Sam Darnold regression game from the Minnesota Vikings, where he looked in playing his old team a lot more like the quarterback that the Jets got versus the one the Vikings have had the first quarter of the season, and they still find a way through. Sam Darnold made some big completions at the end of this game to put it on ice when it looked like the Jets might be mounting a little bit of a comeback, but I thought Quincy Williams and that defense, they don't have much to hang their heads on going up against the team that so far has been statistically on both sides of the ball the best team in the NFL.
Yeah, and Jets found themselves down 17-0 in the second quarter. Aaron Rodgers has to pass the ball 54 times, and that many times in the pocket, you're going to risk injury. He got bent over backwards on one play where you thought, oh, no, he's going to be done. They only ran the ball 14 times. All that being said, they play the Bills this week, and if they beat the Bills, the Jets are technically in first place. They would have the same record, but the Jets would have a win against the Bills. So the Jets would technically be in first place with no confidence in this offense at all.
None. Absolutely none. That's why, again, it's admirable for the defensive players to hold themselves to that standard. And they've understood the last few years. This is how they've had to live their life, in holding themselves to an unbelievably high standard relative to the offense. But you're right. It's amazing we're at that point. Quite honestly, Dad, you talk about quarterbacks getting banged up. We didn't mention it in the Bills game, too. Josh Allen takes his head right off the turf really hard in that game, getting sacked from behind, goes out briefly and comes back in. I'd have to imagine that's going to have a lot of people scratching their heads about the concussion protocol when you clearly saw it. Now, again, it's different for every player. We see plenty of guys get their heads banged off the turf during games and not suffer concussions, whereas others, it can have a massive impact. But that one seemed it seemed like it rattled him in real time. And so what we talk about with him going into this week and going into that game will be fascinating.
Yeah, it will. I mean, what's on the line for this game after the Bills losing a couple now in a row? It sets up for an interesting AFC East where, again, confidence is lacking in some of the teams.
You know, anytime that we've got scenes of local police fishing goalposts out of a river, you know it was a pretty wild weekend in the sport. And that's what we had this weekend, Dad, Jesse, in college football. A slate of games that after the prior weekend was supposed to sort of be our exhale, our letdown, and instead had us white-knuckle driving till the wee hours of the morning with Miami and Cal, who started the game day. Look, what an incredible Saturday, Dad, overall for the sport, to have your team on a bye. Shout out to Notre Dame, Texas, LSU, and some of the other contenders who got to sit at home and take in the stress of other fan bases. Because as we've said, watching close games is great unless it's your team. And so for those of us who did not have their team have to go out here and potentially suffer the stench of some of these back-breaking losses, Dad, to get to start the day with the scenes from College Game Day at Cal, the Calgorithm on full display. You got the kid making the $100,000 kick with McAfee and Herbstreit, rolling into a weekend where we saw 5 AP top 11 teams go down and almost a 6th in Miami, and a total shakeup at the top end of the sport was absolute cinematic masterpiece. We don't usually talk about a lot of college football on Mondays in the show because the NFL is so chock full of it. But coming off this college football weekend, we got a humbling reminder that for the folks that want to continue to try and talk about the expanded playoff, rendering this regular season meaningless, tell me what the hell you saw yesterday and how that didn't seem to mean a whole hell of a lot to a lot of people.
You're right. I mean, we thought this was a throwaway weekend. I think the only ranked was A&M and Missouri was ranked number 9 and lost. I mean, this was supposed to be kind of a catch your breath weekend because now this Saturday coming up are a lot of incredible matchups. And what did you have? Number 1, Alabama losing to Vandy. Number 4, Tennessee losing to Arkansas. Number 9, Missouri losing to A&M. Number 10, Michigan losing to Washington. Number 11, USC losing to Minnesota. And you're right, a highly ranked Miami team had to come back from down 35-10 at Cal to win that game 39-38. And as far as Alabama and Vandy, I mean, we had Kalen DeBoer on the show, and he talked about how they just had the 24 hours to celebrate the victory over Georgia. And, you know, you move on to the next game, and he lauded his guys for being ready. And Vanderbilt just took it to him. And I remember Nick Saban was on with Pat McAfee. He goes on with every week. And Nick Saban said that Vanderbilt was basically the safest place to play if you're an opposing team, because the opposing team's fans normally fill that stadium.
Dad, not only did he say that everywhere is tough to play in the SEC except for Vanderbilt, which, by the way, shout out to the folks at Vanderbilt. I don't know if you saw this. At the end of the game, instead of running highlights or anything else on the video board, as the fans, which were, in fairness, and it was reminded often on the broadcast, outnumbered by the Alabama fans in Vanderbilt Stadium that is still actively under construction right now as they try and bridge to a new era that Clark Lee can plant his flag on with this win and try and springboard into. On the video board inside this half-finished stadium, Dad, they were playing the clip of Nick Saban saying that over and over as part of a techno remix. They had that one ready to go if and when their number got called. And so they made, Dad, at the same time, 2 Alabama head coaches look bad on that day, did the Vanderbilt Commodores. And Diego Pavia, their quarterback, was the star of the show before, during, and after this game, Dad. A guy who said he grew up idolizing Johnny Manziel and said he's probably watched the Johnny Manziel Texas A&M Alabama upset over 100 times in his life on a playlist on his phone. Went out there and played like Johnny football, 16-20 for 252 and 2 touchdowns through the air, 20 for 56 on the ground in this game, where they went out and took it to him. This Alabama defense, Dad, that started to feel it go off the rails in the second half versus Georgia last week, had no answers this week. As Vanderbilt puts 40 on Alabama is a real sentence that we get to say on Monday in the world of college football for what was the recently crowned number 1, Dad. It was unfortunately eerily familiar for me as a Notre Dame fan who watched Notre Dame go from the highest of highs of beating a Texas A&M team that oh, by the way, told you was a dark horse before the season, and don't look now, is going to be a factor in the college football playoff based on how they're finally starting to play. Connor Wegman back healthy and actually looking like the quarterback that people expected there. But then to follow that up with the NIU loss the same way that Alabama now went from, Dad, they own the best win and the worst win in the sport, you could say, in back-to-back weeks, right? Oh. They have the best win in the country over a team in Georgia that is somehow in the AP poll ranked ahead of them at this point, which AP voters make that one make sense to me. I'll hang up and listen. But they own that win and then this loss to Vanderbilt in the same 2-week stretch. So, Dad, they're kind of a perfect one-team sample size for how difficult it is to assess the sport so far, where outside of Texas and Ohio State, I think that's your upper crust at this point. And I know it's a cop-out because neither of them has lost the big game like this, but those look like the only two teams that have consistently gone out and put on wax performances that look like national championship caliber teams.
And I tell you why I give Vandy so much credit is, I mean, listen, they were up 23-14 at halftime. They were up 30-28. Alabama got within 2 points going into the fourth quarter. So you thought, oh, okay, Alabama's now going to take control of this game enough. They're going to put Vandy aside and win this thing. And Vanderbilt outscores them 10-7 in the fourth quarter. Vanderbilt controlled the ball. They ran the ball. You mentioned the quarterback, 16-20. They ran the ball 54 times. Now, they only averaged 3.1 yards a carry, but they ran it, and they controlled the clock for 42 minutes in this game, making Alabama have to score quickly, which, now they did put up 35 points, but Vanderbilt kept answering the bell. Again, when I saw a 2-point game going in the fourth quarter, I was like, okay, Alabama's gonna take this game over and probably win comfortably. And sure enough, it did not happen with Vanderbilt just running the ball, controlling the clock, keeping the ball out of Alabama's hands.
Yep, I mean, Ryan Williams did the thing again, another 58-yard spectacular acrobatic sideline touchdown for the freshman extraordinaire. And Vanderbilt holds on and wins. So, Dad, it's one of many, but as we sit here now, and again, you look at the AP rankings coming off that, we're at where I think is the right spot, where Alabama was number one last week after that undeniably great win against Georgia, but Texas, and it's really, in my mind, Texas, when Quinn Ewers is healthy, to me looks like the firm national championship favorite, and really has since that win over Michigan earlier this season. And then Ohio State keeps handling business right now. Next weekend is where the rubber meets the road. Ohio State and Oregon is going to tell us a whole lot about both of those teams as the Ducks are finally playing better football. They got the middle of their offensive line sorted out. But we're kind of just trying on hats right now, Dad, and I go back, and I don't want to straw man this too much and act like there's a ton of people out here bemoaning the current state of the sport, but we knew when you made the move to the 12-team playoff, there were going to be people talking about what the effect of this on the regular season is, because Alabama still going to be very much in the college football playoff mix. Most of these teams that lost south of Michigan, who now plummets from 10 down to 24 after their second loss of the season, and feels like it's going to be pretty difficult based on the ball we've seen from them to come back in this. But a lot of these teams that have lost, Tennessee's there sitting down at 9. Ole Miss has one loss sitting there at 9. Tennessee at 8, excuse me. They're going to have their day in court when it comes to the expanded playoffs still. But we saw a bunch of games where it's still a reminder of the chaos that governs this sport is the sell, and that if you get too bogged down in that stuff, you're going to ruin your life watching some of the great stuff we've seen on Saturday. But, looking at the rest of that top 5, Dad, Oregon, again, they're in the prove-it game this week. Penn State, unfortunately, they're going to be judged really until we get to them against some of the more upper echelon teams in the Big Ten, because they've been handling business against the teams they're supposed to. Georgia's got question marks after the Alabama loss. Miami's been living dangerously the last couple weeks after storming out the gate. And so this is one of those years where we still look around, and you can blame the portal, you can blame all the change in the sport, but, Dad, it's kind of become like the NFL even more so, where the beginning portion of the season, you're just kind of hoping to get out unscathed because the play has been sloppy for a number of these teams.
I tell you, teams surprised to the good. Clemson, now sitting at number 10, has found their offense. We all thought, or I certainly thought, Clemson was going to have a down year. Defense good, offense maybe not so much. BYU sitting at 14, 5-0. And then, we know you mentioned the teams that are going to still be in the playoff hunt. But remember, those teams that are around 11 and 12 fighting for that 12th spot are going to get bumped by Boise State if Boise State right now is the group of 5 best team and they're ranked 17th, unless they're in the top 12. If they're outside the top 12, they take the 12th slot. And right now it's a tie at 11 with Iowa State and Notre Dame. But Boise State, if they're outside the top 12, remember, they automatically slot in at 12, and who's ever at 12 gets knocked out of the playoffs. So Boise State, how about Ashton Genty? I mean, the kid is just unbelievable with what he is doing. He is the Heisman favorite, without question.
Has to be. I mean, it's just disgusting at this point. And he's currently the favorite on DraftKings Sportsbook. Well, again, even if it's just for a moment in time, look at that snapshot. 2 position players at the top of the Heisman board.
Yes.
Betting odds, I get, aren't a perfect proxy for what voters might be thinking. But, man, it's been really impossible to avoid. And again, he was playing against Utah State, not a good football team. But went out there and cracked 1,000 yards in 5 games, Dad. He did 1,000 yards before he got to 100 carries on the season. 95 carries for 1,031 yards and 16 touchdowns.
And he didn't play in the second half of this game. In other games, he hasn't played like the fourth quarter. He's not playing. That's why he has so few carries.
This one in Sacramento State, he sat basically the entire second half of those games. And 2 of the games we're talking about, the monster ones, Dad, Washington State and Oregon, Power 4 teams. I know Washington's kind of in the ether right now, but Power 4 teams based on the standard we've seen, and that's who he's performing against.
Yeah, it's impressive watching him do what he's doing. And I know he's a group of 5, and I know he's not playing against the competition in the Power 4s, but I'm glad he's getting his due because he deserves it. He is running incredibly well.
He hasn't had a game this year with fewer than 127 yards on the ground. There was a prop bet where he was juiced to minus money. It was minus 130 for Ashton Genty to score 3 or more touchdowns, and it hit. And we said going into the weekend, you'd be foolish not to bet it at this point because, Dad, while he is playing against group of 5 competition, he is going out there and making it look like he is heads and tails better than everyone else in the field. And that's all we ask. It's kind of the you can only play who's on your schedule theory that we say for some good teams who go out there and blow them out and who burp them like good teams. Ashton Genty, the Boise State offensive line's a good group, but we see him contacted at and behind the line of scrimmage a bunch, and he's just impossible to tackle. He's like the same ends of the magnet where they just can't meet him with the same force and get him down. So he's been incredible to watch this entire season. I'm glad we got enough games early on and had the narrative already coming off the offseason to get him to this point. Because, Dad, with the beginning of the year, you kind of doubted how much of a Heisman push you could get for a guy in the group of 5 in this day and age. And certainly they deserve some credit for putting him out there the way they have. They rolled out his social media Heisman campaign as the season got started. But he's gone out there and done it on tape. And we talk about the importance of out of conference early in the season. He did it in enough of those high-profile matchups to where now it is undeniable greatness from him.
And then you look at, like, the Big 12. The Big 12 we talked about at the top, maybe Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Arizona, Utah. And the undefeated teams in the conference right now are Texas Tech, BYU, Iowa State, Colorado, and West Virginia are the undefeated teams in conference play, with 2 undefeated teams overall, BYU and Iowa State. I mean, that is a wide open conference.
And that's kind of where we're at overall in the sport, where, again, outside of Ohio State and Texas, the rest of this feels up for grabs in a way that's tremendously exciting. And again, I will say, this was all a ton of fun to get to watch without my team playing this weekend. Biggest winners, Notre Dame, LSU, Texas, getting to sit in the sideline and watch the rest of you guys tear your hair out. It was incredible. I will say besides that, and I'm going to keep going back and beating this drum because we're looking for big takeaways for this weekend, and it really is, hey, the sport has never been this wide open as it's felt the last couple of seasons. You can go back the last 2 or 3 years. When Tennessee got to number 1 a couple of years ago, it felt like, okay, hey, maybe some of this era of the portal and NIL is starting to give us a little more evened out product overall, despite some of these super rosters put together. But the other one I want to tell you to watch out, the other big takeaway from the weekend, that Texas A&M squad, man. Mike Elko's got those dudes playing ball, and before this is all said and done, I think they're going to have their say in how the college football playoff picture shakes out in the SEC. They've got that one, what right now the committee will talk about, quality loss, Dad. We don't know what the committee's going to say much this year in the 12 team. Quality loss to Notre Dame at home week 1, and they've improved ever since, even through quarterback injury.
Yep, and you know how it is, lose early rather than lose late, where it's the last thing in the committee's mind. You lose early and it turns out to a good football team. You're right, considered a very good loss.
They are following the formula. Coming up next, we will give you the formula for an incredible parlay that hits over the weekend that underscores a rookie performance that may have finally matched expectations here on GoJo and Golic. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. It's time for DraftKings crowning moments from this weekend, where we take a look at some of your best winners on the bet slip. And my oh my, we had a Bears fan that timed their fandom and belief in their team pretty well. The bettor was at Cash and Over on X, who had Andy Dalton over half an interception. The Bears minus 9.5 alternate spread. DeAndre Swift over 25 receiving yards. DJ Moore over 60. Cole Kmet over 50. Caleb Williams alternate passing total over 225. And DeAndre Swift 100-plus rushing yards here, as the Bears went out there and put it on the Carolina Panthers this weekend. Probably one of the biggest wins we saw. And if you're this bettor, outside of the joy of knowing your bet hit, seeing your rookie quarterback start to thrive is something that we can talk to our friend and former NFL tackle Marshall Newhouse about coming up next. Hour number 2 here of GoJo and Golic, Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield. And as we look at the rest of the NFL slate leading up to Monday Night Football tonight, Saints and Kansas City Chiefs, we are joined now by former 11-year NFL veteran, offensive tackle, Super Bowl champion, and proud TCU Horned Frog. I saw back on the radio Horn for his alma mater this week, and we won't talk too much about the actual body of that game. Sorry to bring up old stuff, but Marshall Newhouse, kind enough to join us now. What's up, man?
How we doing? Good morning. Yeah, licking wounds in that regard, but what a crazy college Saturday and NFL Sunday, man. It's football. It's alive and well.
It's no doubt. We had a ton of exciting stuff to get to, and we will get to. You know, you're also a part of the pregame power-up. People can catch that. DraftKings Network, 6 o'clock Eastern, Mondays and Thursdays before the primetime games. You, Trey Wingo, Claudia Bellafato, Emerson Lazia, getting everyone ready with what they need to go and bet the game the right way. And we're back to just one Monday Night Football game this week, so we can save some time for that. But, Marshall, we were just talking about the kind of bridge college and pro. Caleb Williams finally had one of those performances that looked more like what we expected from the number one pick. Is just hey, they were playing a Panthers team that we know is maybe too broke to function right now. What did you like from what you saw from the rookie number one pick in this win against Carolina?
Well, what you see is just like a guy who's getting better decision making in a simple way. And, you know, we underestimate the idea that less preseason games means players will be just as prepared when the season starts. That's just not the case. Even veterans need reps, and reps are so valuable. And Caleb is literally, you know, in warp speed from the time he signed after the draft through the training camp that we saw on Hard Knocks. He just needs reps. And so a lot of the reps have been, unfortunately for him, in live game action, and they haven't looked too good. But that's usually situated for training camp and usually situated for those third and fourth preseason games that we laud so much of being boring or the average fan doesn't want to see, but guys need those reps. And so he's just coming along at what I think is a natural pace for a quarterback. And yeah, he had a great game. I don't expect him to have all his games be great, but in the small areas that QBs can improve, his decision-making, his footwork, he's vastly improved. And yeah, Carolina is not doing so hot. You know, they're a team in a little bit of state of flux, but Caleb Williams' performance, these are still pros at the end of the day. I like what I saw from him yesterday.
The 3 rookie starting quarterbacks all won. Now, they didn't beat great teams. Washington beat Cleveland, smoked Cleveland. You mentioned Chicago beating Carolina, and Denver beat Las Vegas, who doesn't have Devontae Adams at receiver and doesn't really have a quarterback. But all three played pretty well. And by the way, Marshall, all 3 have led their teams. They all have winning records. Chicago's 3-2 in a division where every team has a winning record in the NFC North. Denver is 3-2 and Washington is 4-1. I think I know the answer to this, but which rookie quarterback do you think could take their team the furthest?
Yeah, I mean, it's looking like Jaden Daniels. And I was a guy last week who was saying, not pump the brakes, but like, let's tap the brakes a little bit, a little safety tap. Because, you know, again, these things ebb and flow, but he's just exceeding everyone's expectations. He's crushing it. They put him in such a good position to win. Cliff Kingsbury is calling the game to give him every advantage. They're using tempo. They're you know, reminding him to just be decisive and use his legs, which he's really good at. And then he's making pinpoint throws, and it's just something you don't normally see from rookies. But what is the common denominator of all 3 of those situations that you mentioned is that they all 3 have good head coaches and solid defenses. I mean, they're in good situations, and we forget about that because usually quarterbacks drafted high are in terrible situations. And Dan Quinn has got the Washington defense formidable. And, you know, Bo Nix, Sean Payton has that Denver defense playing him as maybe one of the most elite units in the league. And Caleb Williams has a Bears defense that last year finished the season with Matt Eberflus as one of the top 10 defenses. And so that is a crutch that helps you get these rookie quarterbacks to a place where, hey, we can win games. They might not always be pretty, but we're putting win games in the win column.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the Washington defense, probably the most surprising. I mean, maybe you could put Denver up there too, but the Commanders, especially this last week, 7 sacks against the Cleveland Browns in a game where they just thoroughly overwhelmed them. Apparently, we need to start betting the number 2 quarterback taken in the draft to be the guy that makes this immediate impact in succession, because we talked about it last year with the CJ Stroud effect, but you've got the same sort of thing where Dan Quinn comes over to this team, you've got a new head coach in town, you've got a new quarterback, and everyone in that locker room talking about how different the culture is. You saw Sam Cosmi, their offensive lineman, saying, I have not been a part of a good culture like this before. They're all a little shell-shocked. I mean, Marshall, you were around some really high-end teams. You came in early on and won a Super Bowl in the league and were around a team led by a veteran quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. How wild is that for guys that haven't been around winning before to see it up close like that? And how much can it change everyone else outside of just the quarterback in the building?
Yeah, I think I was absolutely spoiled with the situation that I was in. I have 11 years split in the league. I made the playoffs 8 different times. Just a lot of established veteran quarterbacks, some going in the Hall of Fame, head coaches who had an established record and just knew how to win. And it's the little things that you, as a young player, it's all going so fast, you're not paying attention to. But year after year, you're picking up on, oh, we emphasize this thing, whether it's situational awareness, end of game tactics, trying to score before the half, just little things of how we control the clock. And then down to the actual players making plays. When you're around stuff like that, that absolutely bleeds off on you. And when it's not there, it absolutely shows. It makes everything throughout the week more tedious. When you're preparing, you're in games and you have a little bit less optimism of like, hey, we're going to figure this out, because we've seen people kind of just miss the mark on the things that help you win. And so after seeing it early, done the right way, to other teams that weren't doing it the right way, is a stark difference. And it makes all the difference in the world, especially if you got a rookie QB who you paid some odd millions of dollars that you're hoping to perform.
Nice humble brag. 8 playoff appearances in 11 years. Yeah.
It's earned, Senior. You know that.
Right? That's great. Which now, again, we had a rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud lead Houston to a division title. But if Washington were to not win the division title, would you give Philadelphia or Dallas, after a win last night against here in Pittsburgh, a better chance of overtaking Washington?
Man, for the first 4 weeks, I would have said Philadelphia, but until they show us otherwise, they have some really deep-rooted issues between Nick Sirianni and how he is coaching that team and how they're showing up on Sundays, because they've got all the talent in the world, but there's just so many things that aren't clicking. And Dallas, as much as, attention as they draw, and talk sports and all that stuff, they've been playing pretty consistent ball. And obviously, we always talk about them in regards to playoff performance and lack of Super Bowl appearances, but they have a really solid team. And I think people sleep on Dak way too much. And so, yeah, the performance last night against Pittsburgh leads them to that score with 20 seconds left. I mean, they are a very well-rounded team when they can play to their standard. I still think there are gaps on defense. But if we're talking in the division, the team that might unseat Washington for that division win, I would take Dallas at this point.
I want to go on the bottom end of things before we get to Monday Night Football. Who had a worse weekend? Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns offense that we talked about, sacked 7 times. That experiment looks fully cooked there. Or Antonio Pierce, who got an 8-year show cause penalty in college football from his time at Arizona State, and then had to go out and watch whatever it was that the Las Vegas Raiders have put on wax in the midst of also being involved in the Devontae Adams social media-liked potential trade drama.
Well, I'll put it this way. In the Urban Dictionary next to "if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying" is Antonio Pierce's picture, because they were doing whatever. I mean, we talk about lack of institutional control. 8 years of show cause is insane. I don't know if we've seen that before. They were just wilding in every sense of the word. But on the field, it's Deshaun Watson, because it looked worse than it's even looked this entire season. And so I start to get to the point where, people are like, do you bench him? Do you keep playing? Do you put Jameson there to try? I'm worried about the other 52 guys on the team who I'm showing up and preparing every week. If I'm the left guard, if I'm the defensive end, if I'm the corner, and I got to watch that, and I got to put my body on the line for that. Yes, we're professionals. We're all getting paid, but that is we're not even getting a chance to win. We show up on Sundays and we're like, well, here we go again. That's a terrible place to be when I'm throwing my body around. So on the lighter side, Antonio Pierce was just, he had a couple money guns that were the colors of Arizona State, in his pocket at all times. But I give me with Deshaun Watson and just that whole situation. It's souring worse and worse by the week.
I can say, Dad, we talk about a lot of coaches on the hot seat. Kevin Stefanski, does he survive this if it keeps going like this with Deshaun Watson, who he hitched his wagon to as well?
I mean, I don't know. There's going to be a lot of hot seats where quarterbacks go, coaches go as well. So I definitely think he is on the hot seat. Now, injuries certainly haven't helped this team. Their O-line has been absolutely decimated. Their tight end and Njoku, who had a great year last year, has been hurt. Nick Chubb isn't back. So you can look at and say these are reasons they're not playing well, but they definitely missed on the quarterback position, and they gave the best contract to, and they absolutely swung and missed on it.
And I will say, he was the coach of the year last year in a season where he had to navigate losing a bunch of quarterbacks and getting down to Joe Flacco and all the things he did there. I'm not saying he should lose his job, but I'm saying usually people that are assigned to this quarterback and hitch themselves there, that's kind of how it works. I'll be curious to see how the Browns sort through the wreckage, because I don't think they can pull out of this nosedive, Dad.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And the way Cincinnati's offense is playing, Baltimore overall, save for the back end of that defense, I just don't see them being able to pull out of this at all. And you're right. I don't know if Stefanski loses his job over this, but there's going to be a number of teams that we have been talking about already that are going to be looking for a quarterback come next year. Certainly one of the teams not is going to be Kansas City, as Kansas City and New Orleans get set to take off tonight, Marshall. And for New Orleans, first two games of the season, they put up 40 burgers and wins. And then their two losses in a row, they put up, 15? They only put up 12 against Philly and 24 against Atlanta. Where's the offense gone?
Yeah, I mean, if you're still looking on aggregate, they're still top scoring offense in the league. But yeah, the last two games have been rougher outings. I think they got those patented Vic Fangio handcuffs put on them in one of the games. And then, yeah, I think their execution kind of fell off a cliff a little bit. But I think there's still a lot there. They've still got deep threats. I still like the structure of the Clint Kubiak offense. And I think they just need a little time to adjust because, yeah, they came out bludgeoning people and then they got hit in the mouth a little bit. But they've lost these last two games by a combined 5 points. So I'm not too concerned. I think they can get things back on track. I think they're going to emphasize running a little more with Alvin Kamara, and they're hoping they're getting their, oft maligned by the head coach running back Kendra and Miller to have a 1-2 punch. And then, yeah, getting Chris Olave involved in the passing game a little bit more. He kind of got put on probation, if you will, against Philly and against Atlanta. But, there's still a lot there. And again, they weren't far out in those games. If they win those games by one, you're like, oh, it's an ugly win, we'll take it. But they lost, in rough fashion to Atlanta with the comeback. And then to Philly, it came down to the last possession. So I'm not too concerned. But yeah, now you're facing the Chiefs and Steve Spags. And I'm just hoping that they stay ahead of the chains a little bit because it could get not great if their offense is not necessarily structured to withhold these third and long situations where Spags really gets creative. Sorry to jump ahead here a little bit, but I like what they could do if they're ahead of schedule, if they stay on the schedule.
All right, well, with that in mind, let's get on schedule here. We got about a minute left. Let's cash it or trash it for this game on Monday Night Football. Cash it or trash it's presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. The Chiefs 5.5-point favorites in this game. Marshall, we got about 50 seconds left here. Who is your pick and what is the key to the game in your mind?
I still have the Chiefs. Listen, until they show me otherwise, they can't figure something out. Like they're the ultimate pet puzzle masters. One piece goes down, they put another piece in. Pat Mahomes is not having a great season, but again, winning when you're this, decimated by injuries in this way, it's just an elite performance by the GM, the head coach, and the offensive play caller. So give me the Chiefs. I think the keys will be tonight again them finding a new weapon. Without Rashee Rice. I think Kareem Hunt might get some carries, and they might lean on the run a little bit more, and maybe use one of their second or third tight ends as a weapon.
All right, there we go. The depth of this roster getting flexed. You can check out the depth of our roster. Again, the pregame power-up, 6 p.m. Eastern tonight with Marshall and the gang getting you ready to go. Marshall, appreciate it as always, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you to Marshall Newhouse for stopping by. Dad, sticking with Monday Night Football for a second, as we do have Chiefs Saints. Back to just one Monday Night Football game. So for some of the people out there, I was not one of those. I enjoyed double dipping a little bit. I liked being able to have one game to hedge on if the other one went to hell. Now we get one, and we're in here. And I think we're at a fascinating time for the Kansas City Chiefs, Dad. Because for a team that is coming off 2 straight Super Bowl wins, seeking a third, has the best quarterback in the NFL by most people's estimations, even if he's not currently playing like it right now, and is undefeated, we're in prime doubt the Chiefs territory. We're between our own Claudia Bellafato. I've seen Ben Solak over at ESPN writing about it. Plenty of people have seemed comfortable uttering not Chiefs demise talk, but definitely doubting talk about this Kansas City Chiefs team. So what's your assessment of them through this portion? I know some wins are ultimately what defines you, but as you look at the health of this team and how they're actually playing, do you see any reason for this doubt that's starting to pop up a little more?
Well, I mean, they're kind of living on the edge, right? I mean, they're certainly not blowing teams out there. One score game. They're all 4 are 1-score games. And last year it was led by a dominating defense, a defense not as dominating this year, at least at this point, though the last 2 games holding their opponents to 10 and 17 points. And offensively, even Pat Mahomes said he wasn't satisfied with the way they played last year, and they lose their leading receiver and Rashee Rice this year. It hasn't been a great offense. We keep trying to find a way to say, oh, this is it. Oh, this is it for them. This is it for them. And they keep finding, get back to me when they lose, right? I mean, they keep winning, and that's all it's about. You don't have to blow teams out like we saw New Orleans blow 2 teams out and then lose 2 games. Every game's not going to be a blowout. The bottom line is to get a win. And while it hasn't looked pretty all the time in Kansas City, the bottom line is they're getting a win. I think it's going to be against a tough New Orleans defense. New Orleans defense gave up 10, gave up 19, gave up 15, and then 26 last week to Atlanta. But the defense has been playing pretty well. So that's the matchup I look for at Arrowhead is this Saints defense against. You're waiting for this Mahomes offense to explode. And I don't know if it ever will. Again, Pacheco's out. The running game is hurt. Kareem Hunt may, as Marshall said, talk about getting some carries, but where are you going? Xavier Worthy, obviously Travis Kelce, but you've lost your big hitter in Rashee Rice. Now, your defensive stretcher, Xavier Worthy, obviously is there, but the guy who had the most targets and the most catches is out, and you're just kind of waiting for this offense to explode. And I don't know if it ever will, but you know what? They'll take wins. That's all that matters.
They will, and I don't think this Saints team is built to really test them in the ways that might make a loss show up, where all of a sudden we would reconcile with a lot of the flaws. Because you know how it is, even when you're on a team and you're winning, it's a lot easier to sort of paper over some of the flaws because you don't have to really reckon with it after a loss. If you're a coach, yeah, you can coach hard from a winning standpoint, but there's nothing quite as motivating as now the stress created in a building when you went out there and took the L that weekend. And for this Chiefs team, you look at offensively, well, again, their pressure rate stats don't indicate it. We know left tackle's been an issue. The edges of that offensive line have put Patrick Mahomes in a position where he's getting the ball out faster than he ever has in his career to try and offset for that lack of weapons. This Saints defense, 24th in pressure rate, so they're not a team that's going to, I think, overwhelm them in that regard. They're an okay rush defense, but can you load up because the Chiefs' passing attack is so limited? Dad, it's the other side that I worry about because we talked with Marshall about what's happened to the Saints' high-flying offense. You hollowed out the middle of the offensive line. I was yelling till I was blue in the face after the first couple of weeks. This worked because they were whooping ass along the lines of scrimmage. Part of that is playing the Cowboys, but Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, both guys that are going to be out that were huge stalwarts in the interior of that offensive line, don't live there right now. Eric McCoy, we know, has been dealing with injury for the last couple of weeks. Cesar Ruiz out for this game as well, alongside Taysom Hill and some others that are integral to this offense that was built much more on, hey, the foundation up front allowing you to do all that fun Kubiak stuff versus just, oh, well, Derek Carr and Rashid Shaheed, who is on with us, being some part of this new high-flying passing attack. And so I think you combine that hollowed-out portion of their interior offensive line with Chris Jones being the strength of that Chiefs defense that still can get after you. And I just don't think they're going to be able to keep pace in this one. Now, 5.5 for this current Chiefs team, that's a little tight for me. And I might think about giving the Saints the points just because I think this could be a really low-scoring rock fight. But I think the Chiefs still are in good position to win this just because that Saints offense now is compromised in the place that it was the strongest before.
Yeah, I do think the Chiefs win it, but as we said, 4 wins, 4 one-score games. The spread's 5.5, so I don't know if I'm willing to give the 5.5.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think Saints plus the points is probably where I would lean right now. The under definitely feels like the route to go at that number at 43. But we have to get going here because we've still got more games to look at. And so, Jesse, let's whittle it down. Sports Talk Radio is a beautiful thing because we all basically just work on funny ways to say the same binary. And so we're going to cut out all the fluff, and we are going to play real or not real on a Monday morning after the NFL weekend on GoJo and Golic.
Yeah, pretty simple concept here. I'm sure you guys watching at home or listening at home can figure this out. So is it real or not real, fellas, that the Bears are finding their groove?
Dan, I'm going to say real just because I've thought even in the midst of some struggles, Caleb Williams has still been showing signs of how he managed that offense in a way that were eventually going to yield positive results. This Carolina team is just a check-the-box squad because defensively they are a gutted house of horrors, and we saw the Andy Dalton balloon finally let out a little bit of air. Bryce Young even got time at the end of that game, and so you went out and checked the box, but you did it decidedly and at an important juncture. And so I think to Marshall's point, that preseason effect is wearing off, and you're starting to see the reps accumulate enough to where the weapons on this offense are actually getting to show their wares.
Yeah, I definitely think it's starting to get for real. Though their last 2 wins, now they beat the Panthers a week before they beat the Rams, both 1-win teams. But we weren't sure what the Bears were going to be. but Caleb Williams is definitely growing into this offense. Still, his escapability has been impressive, but you're just not sure what he's going to do with the ball once he escapes. They play Jacksonville this week. Then they have a bye, and then it's a matchup of number 1 pick against number 2 pick, Chicago and Washington on October 27th. So really looking forward to that game.
A little existential crisis for everybody to try and measure how their special new fun guy does against the other one. All right, Jesse, what do we got next?
Yeah, so a team that's been in the headlines since the preseason dropped a tough divisional matchup, falling to 2-3 on the year. So, guys, is it real or not real that the 49ers championship window has closed?
Oh, Dad, I'm going to say not real. I still think that's a team that's been, again, reshaped their offense. We were talking about this before the show, has gone from the premier yards after catch offense in the NFL to now being in the bottom 10 in the league in terms of where their yards come from on offense. But Brock Purdy's been playing really well for the majority of this season. They've been decimated by injury to start. I don't know, based off what we've heard, if they're ever going to get a healthy Christian McCaffrey back for the body of this season. But that being said, Dad, this to me is more about the Cardinals becoming the more competitive outfit we predicted this year, and maybe that 49ers defense still having some questions in my mind.
Yeah, the championship window closing, that's not real. What it did is it's leveling off the NFC. We thought the NFC was top heavy with San Francisco and Detroit. And then who was that next team? Was it, we thought, Philly, but they certainly aren't it. And look at the surprises we have. Washington, Minnesota, Seattle, though they have lost their last 2. Arizona, which team is going to show up? A team that only scores 14 in a loss or beats, a San Francisco by a point 24-23. Then you have Atlanta. You have Tampa Bay. We'll see what New Orleans does. You have more teams in the mix. I think all that happened in the NFC is we have more teams involved in the kind of the jumble of teams of who can come out. But I do not think that the championship window for the 49ers has closed.
No, quite honestly, as we come up on the Brock Purdy payday that's coming this offseason, Dad, it's actually made me a little bit more heartened to see the way that he's responded in particular, because they're going to have some things I think they need to do on defense. It's really Fred Warner keeping the band together on that side of the ball right now as they've weathered some early season struggles. But offensively, we know things are going to change for them, and I'm a lot more comfortable with paying Brock Purdy based on what he's been able to do, shouldering the load when guys have gone down, than maybe we're. And listen, still, you give some credit to Kyle Shanahan with that, the way they have more play calling to fit. Juwan Jennings having to be your leading receiver at times, although we did get more Brandon Ayuk this last week. Right. I think all of this should actually, in a way, make you feel better about the future of the 49ers beyond this season.
I agree. My far the biggest question mark is Christian McCaffrey of what is he ever going to be again? A, is he going to get on the field? And B, can he stay on the field? And C, can he produce when he's on the field? I would imagine if he could stay on the field, that means he's healthy and he'll be able to produce again. But that's the biggest question for this team of if and when he'll get back on the field.
No doubt about it. All right, big question still for us coming down. Jesse, what do we got next?
Yeah, so let's stick in the NFC. We saw some fun games, high point totals to start the season in this division. But if I said the NFC South was the most wide open division in football, would you say that's real or not real?
Dad, I think so. I think our prediction before the start of the season holds true that outside of the Carolina Panthers, anybody can win this division. And so far through a few weeks, we've seen just that, where the Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers don't have really an earthly interest, or in some cases the personnel to play defense the way that can win you this division right now. But both offenses, Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield, we just saw the shootout between the two of those teams. And then New Orleans on the other side, defensively, I think the strongest unit of the three in contention there, and waiting for their offense. It's going to be, Dad, who gets healthy? Antoine Winfield Jr. on the back end for Tampa Bay, or the interior of that Saints offensive line, that to me decides kind of the outcome as we get later in the season for this division.
Now, I would say the NFC North is the only division where every team is over 500. The Bears with this win put them at 3-2. Packers are at 3-2. But I do not think that's the most competitive division, with Minnesota being 5-0, though I do think Minnesota will eventually come down to earth. I do think of three teams with a real shot at winning the division, I think it is definitely the NFC South.
Well, yeah, I say best division and most wide open, two very different conversations. Because right now, the NFC North probably has claim to best division. I mean, who else would be even in contention at this point? We thought it might be the AFC East. The AFC North, I think, is really a two-team race when it comes to that. That's no disrespect to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but you and I both have them as third, and I don't think have a realistic chance of actually winning that division the way I think the other two teams are capable of there. But for the NFC North, Dad, you're talking about the Lions, Vikings, and Green Bay Packers. I think all teams on their best day that are capable of going out and winning that division and being playoff teams, and then a Bears team that, to your point, has a winning record, even if we question some of who the wins are against.
Yep. No, I agree. I don't have the Bears being able to win that division, but the other three. So I guess three teams that could win the division in both the North and the South in the NFC.
All right, Jesse, let's get to one more. What do we got here?
All right, we have 5 weeks of sample size for this one, so I'm just going to say it, okay? Real or not real, Jaden Daniels is the best quarterback in the NFC East.
He's playing like the best quarterback in the NFC East. We can say that now. Whether or not on his best day and in a clutch situation, Dad, if all things were equal on the team, would you take him over Dak Prescott at this point? I think is really the conversation, because we know Daniel Jones not involved in this, unfortunately. Jalen Hurts, I don't think, has played to this level for the last season and change now. And so it would really be Dak Prescott, who was the MVP runner-up last year, or Jaden Daniels, who affects the game in a markedly different way, Dad. Who would you pick?
Yeah, I mean, Dak Prescott has about, 300 yards more passing, has 4 more touchdowns, and 2 more interceptions than Jaden Daniels. Boy, that's a tough one, because Jaden just adds with his legs, and he doesn't really want to use his legs. He's not looking to run, but he can run so effectively when he does. Man, I don't, and Dak just turning the ball over with interceptions and with fumbles. That's a real key. But I just have a hard time taking a rookie over Dak at this point. I really have a hard time.
Yeah, I would say, again, if we're saying who's the best quarterback in this division, I'm still going to say Dak Prescott, but there's no denying that the Washington offense is playing the best football of anyone in this division.
Yes.
And right now, Jaden Daniels at quarterback is the tip of the spear for that. And what's even more, we talked about this with Marshall, it's not just that he's playing great football, but it's that him in conjunction with Dan Quinn have this whole locker room believing.
Like C.J. Stroud last year, Jaden Daniels as a rookie is showing the poise of a veteran. It's very, very impressive.
That's what I'm saying. Next year, whoever the second quarterback taken is, I'm predicting that guy to pop, considering we've got now 2 season sample size that let us know that's the case. Dad, I want to play you this sound from Browns coach Kevin Stefanski. We talked about them a little bit with Marshall Newhouse earlier this hour, but it's all bad in Cleveland right now, and it seems to be rotting from the quarterback position back there right now. And after a weekend, there's an abject disaster where it's one thing for your defense that's been the standard in that organization for a while to struggle the way that it did against Jaden Daniels, a rookie in that offense that got kind of lambasted by an opposing defender earlier this year for being a simple, college offense. It's the other for this Washington Commanders defense to feel like it found its footing and its confidence against this Cleveland offense, although here is Kevin Stefanski saying they will not make a change at that position.
Yeah, we're not changing quarterbacks. We need to play better. I need to coach better, and that's really what it is.
Kevin, what happened at the end of the drive, the first drive, and the second half?
Yeah, obviously there was some we had a penalties and some miscommunications, which are completely on me. I'll take responsibility for all of that. That looks like losing football to me. I'll get it fixed.
Now, Dad, the thing in this conversation is he's not wrong about the other aspects of this. Remember, we talked before the season, and I said this Browns offensive line seemed like it was in position to atrophy a little bit between all of its tackles coming off of injuries last season, losing one of the best offensive line coaches in Bill Callahan in the NFL, and that unit has looked far less than itself. You couple that with the fact that there was no Nick Chubb to hang your hat on with a running attack that had been the star of the show for that team since he had showed up, and you get Deshaun Watson being the third most pressured quarterback in football, but also second to last in EPA per dropback, dead last in yards per attempt. It's been all bad, and while it might not all be his fault, Dad, he's done nothing to elevate this team the way a quarterback paid what he is paid needs to do, and so I really do not understand at this point the value of not at least trying something else, especially when you've got a quarterback like Jameis Winston on the roster who's actually been a starter in this league and has recently impacted teams in a way that's got some winning associated with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's the thought of Stefanski having to answer to ownership to say I'm benching the $230 million quarterback, the only all guaranteed deal in the league. There's a responsibility to the other 52 guys in the locker room. But I agree, he is not the only problem. That defense gave up 34 points to Washington. That defense got run on for 215 yards by Washington. They have a lot more problems than just Deshaun Watson. You mentioned the line. They don't have a running game. They're leaning on Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy as receivers, not a stellar duo after losing Njoku, who had a great year at tight end last year. They have a lot of issues. Deshaun Watson is one of them. He's not the only one of them, but the quarterback always gets the lion's share of the success and the blame. And there's obviously the other things that go along with Deshaun Watson. And I guess the thought from Stefanski is if you go away and you bench him, it would have to probably be for good. And are you going to be better off with a Jameis Winston who is not a running quarterback? The O-line is still going to struggle. The Jameis would still get sacked like Deshaun's getting sacked. So how much better would it be?
I guess to me, it's less about how much better it would be in the immediacy and more turning the page and finally admitting you made a mistake. And like you said, rich people at the helm of these organizations sign the checks and they got egos like everybody else and maybe want to say, hey, no, you told me this guy was good, so I went out here and paid an ungodly amount of money and nuked my reputation for the foreseeable future in the name of a quarterback who hasn't shown us any of the football stuff that might have, in the football sense, helped you at least swallow that a little bit more tastefully. And so I Dad, think it's time for this organization to finally just have that conversation with itself. We made a mistake, a decision that will go down as one of the worst mistakes in NFL history on a number of different levels, but admit it, move on, and start to prepare for whatever that future is going to look like, which should be a different quarterback at the helm in the 2025 season, no matter what for the Cleveland Browns. Start your future now, because to the point, Dad, we always talk about ownership in this is kind of worried about the blowback. What Cleveland Browns fan at this point isn't going to do cartwheels Eagles if they finally get to wave goodbye to this guy? Tell me, which Browns fan is not excited if they announce this week they're benching Deshaun Watson?
Nobody would be heartbroken. As a matter of fact, there would be a lot of fans who are just cheering for Deshaun Watson because he's quarterbacking the team that they root for. I don't think there would be one tear shed for benching Deshaun Watson. It's just, again, ownership and management admitting that they made a mistake. There are egos involved. Nobody ever wants to admit you made a mistake. But again, you owe it to those in the locker room to try all you can to win, even if it's kind of a Hail Mary. Because, again, I don't know how much better Jameis Winston is going to do behind that decimated offensive line and no running attack.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Again, I don't think it improves, but I think that's the point, is if we're talking about it being a negligible difference or not improving, that's more an indictment on your current starter than it is the backup situation. And hell, we saw last year Kevin Stefanski did a lot more with the backups on this roster than we've seen. Joe Flacco, who, again, this might just be a Joe Flacco thing because we saw him go out there and perform pretty damn well for the Indianapolis Colts this weekend. But to get those kind of performances, to see the offense jump and just start throwing for 300 yards like it was their job every game after he took over, and then since Deshaun's been back, still not sniff that, to me, is just a reminder of how bad things have gotten for this team. The other bad team we talked about, Dad, over this weekend, how bad has it gone to hell for the Las Vegas Raiders here quickly? Outside of just the Devontae Adams stuff now, you got Max Crosby popping off in the media about having to hear about his relationship with the team after he missed the game with the hamstring. Antonio Pierce, Dad, a guy that took over off the strength of being the locker room guy, now really seeming to struggle making that transition to CEO in a way that makes me wonder what the future is going to look like for him, because he doesn't have his quarterback yet, so that's the advantage you've got, where you're in an organization where Mark Davis doesn't have a ton of money like everybody else to just be hiring and firing and coaches too willy-nilly left and right. But you don't have your quarterback yet, but I got to imagine there's at least part of Mark Davis that's watching the way that this season's been managed and going, hey, if I'm eventually going to either pay money for a quarterback or draft them, is Antonio Pierce, the guy who's implicated in the battle publicly with our star receiver right now who wants to be traded, is that the guy that I want managing whoever I'm going to give the reins to at that position? And right now, the answer seems like it's been no.
Yeah, I would agree. Listen, they need help on the O-line. They have no running. Excuse me. They have no running game. Their leading receiver by a couple is the tight end, the Brock Bowers. Jacoby Myers is playing pretty well, but you won't have Devontae Adams. So they need a complete rebuild starting at quarterback position on that offense. And you just wonder if there's going to be new quarterback, new coach to go along with it.
Yeah, you'd hate to see someone be one and done, even though we know for Antonio Pierce it's not one and done because he was there on the staff. He was the interim coach after that. So he's been around and they know him. And again, part of this is Max Crosby is the face of that organization right now, and deservedly so. He is a defensive player of the year caliber player who embodies everything that you want out of that Raider mentality. He plays incredible amounts of snaps. He goes out there and he's effective. He embraces the mentality of this team and made it abundantly clear after the game. Everyone in this locker room knows I would take a bullet for them. Everybody knows that this is the only place that I want to be. But he also sounded like a guy that's just tired, Dad, because this has become par for the course, the circus around this organization where Gardner Minshew gets benched during the course of this game. You've got Devontae Adams hanging in the wings, who he basically came out and said, I love Devontae, but that's not my business to talk about. It's an organization that's become a bit of a mess really early on in this season that feels a lot more like, same old Raiders, as opposed to this team that looked like down the stretch they were smoking cigars and turning some sort of corner.
Yeah, and it just goes to show, while they have other holes as well, that it is a quarterback league, and you need a competent, quality quarterback if you're going to do anything, because quarterbacks can make up for other deficiencies on a team, and they just don't have one.
Quarterback and coaching, because I'll say this, man, the vibes feel very different in that building over in Los Angeles with the Chargers that we were talking about. And Jim Harbaugh, say what you want about him, that guy came in, put two hands on the wheel, and things have felt a lot more stable than they have in Las Vegas for that team out there. For two teams we know chasing Kansas City in the division, but now all of a sudden have to look out for that Broncos defense as well. It's getting very, very strange in the AFC West early this season. Coming up next, we'll take a look at the father-son debut that made its way onto the court for Los Angeles. Next on GoJo and Golic. All right, time to finish the show off the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick ones to send you into the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. If you miss us live, check out our podcast where you can hear our great guests. Thank you to Marshall Newhouse, former NFL vet offensive tackle, and also one of the co-hosts of the pregame Power Up, 6 p.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, for stopping by. You can hear that wherever you hear our pod or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. Dad, let's start off the father-son show, this, that, and the third, with the father-son moment we were all waiting for. The Lakers are in preseason mode, and that means we finally got to see it as LeBron James and Bronny both got to take the court together as the Lakers lost 118-114 to the Phoenix Suns in the preseason. But, Dad, it took a backseat to a moment where J.J. Redick said, he prepared them both for it, saying it was going to happen in this game. It was the second quarter. They played just under 5 minutes together on the court, but LeBron seemed head over heels for this moment, and regardless of what happens, we got to a point that this man had spoken into existence for years that is intergalactically unlikely for so many reasons that they found a way to make happen. So on any level, I understand the nepotism at all. I understand a lot of what people are thinking. It's pretty amazing that we're here at all, and stopping to appreciate that, I think, is okay.
Man, I don't care about any of the talk. I mean, as a father, and to have your son involved in what you do, have your child involved in what you do, and be able to share that stage with them. And I get to do it every day, and did it at ESPN with you as well. It's an incredible feeling for a parent with anything that they can share with their kids. So I don't care what the talk was about LeBron and how it all happened. The fact that it happened, I think about it from the father side of just how cool that moment is and just how unbelievable. Again, we had Ken Griffey Sr. and Ken Griffey Jr. I doubt it's going to happen in our sport of football.
Yeah.
That would mean the dad would have to.
I hope not.
Would have to be it would have to be a quarterback dad playing a long time, possibly like a Tom Brady, if he had a kid early enough to that was at NFL level. But I mean, the stats are inconsequential. Bronny took one shot and missed it, had a couple of turnovers, but that just doesn't matter. Just this moment coming to fruition and just speaking as a father from the father side of it, what an incredibly, incredibly cool moment it had to be for him.
Yep, and LeBron seems like genuinely excited about this. Like, this is a guy that's got so much media polish on him, but he does seem giddy to see this actually come to fruition. So I'm sure for him, Savannah, for the rest of the family, this is something cool and some photos that'll be up in their den for a long time, no matter how this works out long term. And as you mentioned, the basketball side of it, obviously, Bronny's a massive work in progress. He's a guy that I don't think impacts this team meaningfully winning this season, but we've seen him. I mean, we talked to, again, friend of the program, LeBron James, where part of the perspective in this season is to stop and enjoy the roses a little bit more. And so that certainly started in this game.
Now, we don't know. LeBron said he would come back on and tell us what Bronny called him on the court.
Yes.
Right? There had to be some communication. Jesse, what do you think he would have called him? Do you think he would have called him dad like Mike calls me dad?
Hear me out. What if he called him dad? I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Again,
but
we
what
don't want
if?
to speculate. We don't want to speculate because we're above that here as pseudo Big J journalists. So we will do the work and make LeBron read the fine print of his contract that says at some point he has to come back on this show, or at least we're going to try and have that added in. So congratulations to the two of them. Jesse, let's move on to that as we had plenty of playoff action both in the W and in Major League Baseball this weekend, and the MLB side turned a little bit ugly.
Yeah, we had quite the scene at Dodgers Stadium. So Padres-Dodgers going to war in LDS. And Jerickson Profar had an unreal catch. He robs Mookie Betts of his home run. I mean, absolutely unreal. He trolls the fans, does the little, walk away, ooh. And it turned into a problem as fans threw a baseball back at him in the 6th inning, which obviously you can't do that.
Yeah, listen, Dad, this one's real easy. I love atmospheres in playoffs especially, and between two teams like this that are division rivals that have all this. I love animosity to a certain point, but that ends once you start trying to affect the product on the field. And this is easy. You have cameras everywhere now in modern pro sports stadium. You find the people that threw it, you ban them for life. That simple. You should not be able to come and watch Major League Baseball anymore in a stadium once you decide to be a jackass and throw something at a person on the field. I don't care if he bounced at you a little bit after a cool play. Them's the breaks. Yelling back and forth between fans, provided it doesn't verge into the racist stuff we've seen, that's cool. Right. That's part of the game. That's the back and forth you'd love to see. But once you throw something, your ass should be out of there, and that should be pretty easy.
It should be very easy, right? And with all the cameras that we have, you should absolutely know who did it and absolutely ban them with no hesitation whatsoever, because everything you said is 100% right. I know he did a little bit of a hopping and kind of jawing, or I don't know if he even said anything or just was hopping and staring at him, but so what? That is part of the game, and fans can jaw back, like you said, as long as it doesn't cross a line. They can jaw back. But once you throw anything at a player, my God, let me tell you what, you want to make it so that doesn't happen again. Tell the fan they have to face the player one-on-one. No help, no nothing. You just got to face the player. It's you and the player one-on-one. Now you got to throw down. So I bet you won't throw anything anymore.
Trial by
your
combat.
Ass is done.
Trial by combat.
Your ass is gone.
Okay.
I mean, just gone. You cannot hesitate on something like that.
By the way, the Padres went out there and won the game 10-2, beat that ass pretty soundly, and even the series up at 1-1, so you can understand why the tension is high here, because this Dodgers team, again, has the burden of all this expectation on a roster that's now staring down a team in their division that we've talked about with all of our baseball guests in the last couple of weeks. The way the Padres have been playing down the stretch and the way they faced the Dodgers this season, Dad, absolutely capable of beating this team.
Without a doubt. They were 8-5 against the Dodgers. They're absolutely capable of beating the Dodgers. Some of these series are setting up to be pretty good series, especially this one. You just don't want any lines crossed like that line was crossed by that fan.
No, certainly. And again, like you said, in sports, we understand that those lines can get blurred at times. But, man, everyone's usually understood the places that you can't go, and this is certainly one of them. So hopefully we get back to focusing on just the baseball there as we turn the page with that series. The Phillies and the Mets series also tied at 1 apiece. The Phillies get a 7-6 win the other day. So lots of exciting stuff in Major League Baseball's postseason. We'll have plenty of time this week to get into and break down all of that. But, Jesse, let's get to the third. The WNBA postseason gets ready to turn its final page as the Liberty punch their ticket.
Yeah, so they're getting the last laugh and a pretty good troll job here as they advance to the WNBA finals, halting a historic chance for the Aces to three-peat. But as you can see there, give it a little troll job there by the Liberty, and they deserve it. I mean, they were incredible all year.
Got the Yuttas out there on center court. But, Dad, yeah, this is not a surprising result. The Aces coming and getting a game in this series, given their championship medal, something that I think we all figured would be possible. But ultimately, this is what you and I both expected going into this series. The Liberty have been the best team all year, and now it becomes that interesting part. It's kind of like the quote that people always talk about, Dad, with the Miracle on Ice, where everyone hears that and thinks that was the gold medal game against the Soviets, and you still had to go on and win one more, while this Aces team was the goal for the New York Liberty. And I'm sure in an honest moment in that locker room, I know Brianna Stewart and everyone tried to kind of quickly turn the page and say, hey, we still got to win more. This was big for them. This had been the roadblock in front of them. They were two teams that once they had started to build these super rosters were pitted against each other. You slayed the team that had been your big bad, but now whoever comes out of that other series between Minnesota and Connecticut, you're still going to have a time with, and so you've got to reset really quickly.
Yeah, Becky Hammond, the head coach for the Aces, says about the Liberty, they've been the best team all year. Let's be real. Their group earned it. They earned it all year, and they did. New York has been the best team all year, but they're going to have a tough opponent, a physical opponent, no matter who they play. The Sun beat the Lynx by 10, 92-82. That series is going to a deciding fifth game, tied 2-2. So we are looking forward to the finals. But Liberty did knock away one of the big obstacles that had been in their way.
And Becky Hammond emotional after that game, wishing that they could have capped off the season better for Asia Wilson, who had arguably the most prolific individual season in the history of the W. We hope we capped off this show all right. If you agree, download, subscribe, rate, review it. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.